This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, so this video is going to talk about tips for your resume as well as preparing for the interview. And again, this is applicable to new coders, established coders, those just making a career change or changing industries altogether. So let's start first with your resume, right? I recently reopened Project Extern, and I had a woman apply and send me her resume, as I often do. And I had a great conversation with her. Now, full disclosure, I have asked her if I could use a resume. I am redacting this still, however, to remove anything that would identify her. So her current employer, I've changed the name on that. And I also changed the name of her last employer just because it's a doctor's office. And I don't know, I just did. It wasn't just a bigger company. So your resume is the first thing an employer sees before they see you. So you want to ensure that it says something that doesn't make you run away. Understand that as a hiring manager also, many times when we open positions, open jobs, we get an enormous response, especially in the coding industry. We get people who may not qualify, but again, it still hits our desk, it still comes through. We get people that are experienced, and like everyone in between, people that are not even in the industry that are looking to cross over. So the response in the resume is huge. The goal of this is to help you get your resume in front or on top. When it comes to visibility of your resume, there's a few things naturally you don't want to have on it. Of course, like you don't want to have typographical errors. One of the things I've seen on a lot of resumes that is probably a little bit of a pet peeve for me, quite candidly, is like seeing the word HIPAA spelled wrong, right? Like HIPAA with 2 P's, and I'm just like, no, right? You know, people might look for things like that, right? Because if you study it, you get the acronym, like that may be something that's off-putting. Everyone may be not the case, but could very well be the case. So I'm going to share what her resume looked like before I kind of remove what her resume looks like. I've removed anything that would identify her, and I did get her permission just for courtesy because it was a learning lesson for her. So first thing that jumped out, she had her name up here in CCS and CPC. And then when I came down here, it said CPCA, right? Again, not off-putting for me, but I wonder, well, is she a CPC or is she a CPCA? I knew immediately just by looking at her work experience, she was definitely not a CPCA, but she was under the impression that she was a CPCA because she was misinformed and someone told her, oh no, you can't count that experience because it's before you got certified, or another person said, well, oh, because it's only one specialty, that's why they won't count it. If you are currently working in billing, for example, that's one of the closest ones I think about, billing or AR management, whatever they call it, and your job is changing codes, right? So you get a denial, you appeal it, you update, add a modifier, change a code, whatever. Those are related tasks to coding. It affects codes. It affects billing. You can absolutely put that experience on your application to the AAPC and have your A removed. So the first thing I told her is, are you a CPCA or a CPC? She said, I'm a CPCA. I said, okay, so let me correct you there. Is your resume reflective of your experience? She said, yeah. I said, you're not a CPCA. I said, go ahead and contact the AAPC and get them to wipe that off and give you credit for what you've already earned because you've already done the work for your resume. So that was the first thing, dispel that myth. Also, understand when you're looking for a job, that hiring manager gets so much response from it. It's a lot of resumes to go out of. So if you know you're applying for a job that has, that it's going to be a certain kind of coder, right? Obstetric, OBGYN, you know, ortho, cardiology, gastroenterology, whatever the specialty is, and you have that experience, highlight that on your resume. Right? How do you do that? You can put that in the summary up top, or you can identify the job. So if you worked, let's say visionary is one of those ones that's a multi-specialty place, then put surgical codes, right? So when I see something like this, where she worked at Dr. Mary and I modified that name, use code books to assign procedure and diagnostic codes to patients' records and for billing purposes, right? She applied E&M codes for office appointments, and appropriate codes for office-based procedures. Also applied official coding guidelines to assign the accurate diagnosis for outpatient surgeries, right? So looks like maybe this is just limited to diagnosis coding, but then she said office procedures. The question that I ask here is, who's Dr. Mary? What's her specialty, right? And she had her complete name, so I had the complete name. But the question I ask is, what's your specialty? If I'm hiring for urology and you do urology coding, your name just jumped to the stack. In some companies where you don't get all of the resumes, there are recruiters that will, you know, like we had an HR person that would screen us. They would ask the questions that we were looking for, what kind of skills they could look out for on these resumes. And, you know, specialties may be one of them. Like, hey, if you see they've done pain management, work for that kind of office or anything like that, or whatever the specialty was I was looking to fill, that would jump out at the recruiter. Mind you, the recruiter is just the person to call you for the interview typically, right? You would interview with me, but if in that position I was lucky because there was someone who would fish out a bunch of those resumes. So you would never get to me if I was looking for that keyword and it wasn't on your resume. So if you're doing coding in any specialty, you want, and if you're multi-specialty, say that at the top. I'm a multi-specialty coder, right? So when I'm doing the summary of my skills, I am a multi-specialty coder. And then for each job, I would want to say what type of coding I've done. When I dug into this, Dr. Mary was an OBGYN, so immediately I'm thinking, oh, hysterectomies and all of this stuff. She's done procedure and diagnosis coding. So she's done surgeries before. And if I'm working for an OBGYN, like it's funny, she applied for an externship and I was like, are you sure you just don't want a job? She applied for an externship and immediately if she would have put that this was OBGYN, I have a line of business for anesthesia that's OBGYN. Now her resume doesn't say OBGYN, but one thing I know from a training perspective is if I can't find an anesthesia coder, the next best thing to an anesthesia coder for me is a surgical coder, because I can train them in anesthesia. They're already used to coding multi-specialty in the book. That's easier for me. So if you are reporting, if you're doing your resumes, you want to make sure you're standing out. So if you're dealing with a case that's a recruiter, and they're not the person who would interview you, they don't have a whole lot of knowledge about that. They're looking for those keywords. Make your resume jump to the top by indicating what specialty you could report for. Okay. Here she did HCC coding. Love that she put remote. That's a beautiful thing. A lot of our positions, not all, but a lot of our positions in coding are remote. And if you work remotely before for another company, naturally they may call them as a reference, but that tells me that you're capable of working remote, right? Another great thing that she included here, anywhere there's a production expectation and you met it and you satisfied it, put it. So she says at a rate of 10 per hour, right? If she had to do a certain number here, I want to see that if you're on production and you had to satisfy a certain production, because you may be leaving one high production environment for another, or a higher for a lower. And when I look and I say, well, wait a second, she's used to coding, and for her resume, put the efficiency or the quality rate. If you maintained a 95% accuracy or quality rate, put that on your resume. Well, heck, she's used to coding 200 records a day at 95%, accuracy. I'm going to test regardless, but that's important for me because my production could be half of that. So if she's going slower or doing fewer records, I would expect kind of the same quality. Or if we have an equally high production environment, I know that person's used to it. So that's a really great thing. I don't often recommend that because you're going to do a job application, so reason for leaving, like you can put that on it. I don't normally recommend you put that on a resume. However, especially because this is remote and this is a short period of time, when I first eyeballed this, I was like, oh, she's a runner, right? From a coding remote, she wasn't there 6 months, and here again 6 months, and then she was out again. So is she a jumper? Is she a runner? Not everyone will call you in to have you explain that. Sometimes, honestly, when we're trying to recruit, we don't get a whole bunch of candidates. We can become a little less selective in it. But if I'm getting other resumes that kind of don't scare me away, I would call those people first, or they may jump to the top of the stack, and I don't have to review the entire stack, right? Especially if you feel you're interviewing and timing lines up, you could get your candidate pretty quickly. So when I saw this, I thought, uh-oh, I'm afraid she's a runner. Well, if it's going to take me time to train you, and it may be 6 months before you're fully in production and running, I don't know if I want to do another PRF in 6 months to replace you because I think you're a jumper, right? Not what she is. When I explained this, when I looked into this, what actually happened is she worked for this provider, and this provider told her ahead of time. So her dates were also off, right? So it looks like she stopped working here in March, and then she started working here in April. And I'm like, okay, she jumped from manager to insurance verification. Well, her timing was actually not quite true. She worked for this doctor. The doctor indicated that she was closing her practice. And when she told her that, she gave them ample time. There was about a period of time that was a year where she worked both for this doctor and this particular, the California health system, which is her current employer, right? So again, this is a person that can work 2 jobs at one time and manage it. That makes sense, because again, why would a person leave a job that's kind of been that long? This one I wouldn't even question. Where it got questionable for me is the 6-month remote position, a barely 6-month remote position that she left, and then this HCC coding position that, again, she left after this. This particular one, she explained, was due to COVID. They actually laid a lot of people off. So that was the reason for her losing her job. So every employer won't like, but if you see that it's something that might need to be explained, just understand you may not get an opportunity to come in and do the application to explain it. So something of a really short duration where it looks like you may have changed jobs too frequently, that might be a deterrent for some employers. You may want to put that reason there. Here, when I spoke with her, this was actually a temporary position. It was short term. It wasn't meant to be long term. So that's why it only lasted a few months. She did what she came to do when she left. So I would put temporary position. I'd put temporary. So if they say, oh, she left so long, I'm not sure if I want this. Oh, I see. It's temporary. She wasn't here very long. And there was an overlap again with the 2 jobs. And there's times where she was actually working, multiple jobs. Like if you look at August to January 2020, again, she's working at Visionary, and then she's working California Health System. So this is a person that is reliable enough in my mind to work multiple jobs. So if you're making some of those mistakes on your resume, you do want to kind of correct those. Also, if you are a manager, the term manager means different things, right? So immediately we think a manager, we think a person who has employees. You might be a manager who supervises a process. So you're the manager, meaning you're solely or exclusively responsible for a process or a particular role in the company or a job in the company or task. Or you could be a manager that supervises people. Make that demarcation and explain that on your resume so I know what manager is. Immediately I would think, okay, she didn't manage any people just because I didn't see any people there. But you might want to explain that. Don't think just by saying manager, if you don't put the supervisory role that you did, that would work, particularly if you're looking for a lateral position where you manage people and you're okay managing people again. I know some managers is like, listen, I manage people, I don't want to manage people anymore. That may not be their interest. And you want to make that kind of clear on your resume so it's there. So those are tips for your resume itself. Again, do those, and that may help you get a little closer to landing one of your positions that you desire. So let's say you've done that, it's great, you get the call, ring, hi, I'm calling this person, I'd like to offer you to come in for an interview so we can discuss your skills and experience. That sounds very exciting. Right? One of the questions you want to ask while you're on the phone, you don't have to wait until you get to the interview, is, do you have a website? What's the name of the company? And do you have a website? That's important for another reason now, because I guess there's like fraudulent things going on, people trying to get your info, but that's not why I would say ask for a site. You want to be able to know something about the company before you get in. One of the common posts I see on the forum is someone saying, I'm so excited, I got a call for a job interview, what should I do to prepare? So let's say I've just looked this place up, like I put gastroenterology near me and DHC came up, Digestive Health Center of South Florida. So let's say I get a call from Digestive Health Center of South Florida. And oh my gosh, I'm excited, they've got a coding position, they've got an auditing position, they've got a collector position, whatever it is, and I'm excited to take it. If you get the website and the information, you can find out a lot about the site. This is the information that they share with their patient, and it's pretty open. So when I go to the home page, for example, They may be a location that's all over the place, right? And sometimes billing and coding are centralized. You may also be in the office. So it'll tell you your locations where you work. So you may say, wait, you know what? That's really far. I don't want to go there. That's important for you. The place you interview may be different from the place that you're working. So that's something you want to find out maybe before you waste gas. But some of the most valuable, and again, they have a locations tab on many other pages when there's many. The most valuable tab I think that you see on many of these web pages that's going to be helpful to you is services, right? So we're going to click services for digestive, and I see conditions treated and other services. So these are all the conditions they treat, right? So imagine if I had to do a coding test, right? And I, as a manager, I did that. I'm going to just give you an example of what you do every day, or I'm going to make a test out of what you do every day to see, can this person work for me? You can be an experienced coder and have a problem finding a job after that, right? Because a practice wants to know that you understand what they do. An organization wants to know that you understand what they do. And yes, some of them may bring you on if you have other experience and train you, but it's really like how we do here. They may not always go so deep into it. They want someone that knows their line of business, and there's overlap that exists between different specialties. So when I go to their about pages or their services page and I see the kind of procedures performed, I'm going to look at these. These are in my CPT book. I have these. So are there any particular guidelines associated with these services that I want to be aware of? Well, what if I've never even seen a PEG tube? Right? I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how to code it. I don't know how to navigate through it. So I went to the site here, and I use this site sometimes for training if I'm looking for documentation, samples, and I don't want to have to dig through a client system incessantly to find one to redact. I will use mtsamples.com. So if we go here, mtsamples.com, what I did, and I want to show you how I did this just so you can find out how I got here. I'm going to take this PEG tube. Oops, sorry. So let me copy that. I'm going to go to mtsamples.com. Actually, just do that. And I could have done note. I'm going to type note. But before I type note, hold on, let me do this first since it already loaded the search results. I can go to images to figure out what that is if I don't know what it is. I can go to videos to say, hey, YouTube, help me understand what this procedure is. Oh, got it. As well as what it is and why it's done. And then I can back up my search engine and add a note to it. Because again, I've never seen this procedure. I don't know what it is. If they give me a note for this, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to go through it to kind of understand it. So if I add note to that, that's where my MT samples come on, right? And you want to read it carefully, but this is a dictation for a PEG tube or a PEG tube, right? And now I know when I go through this what that procedure is, okay? Moreover, if I want to fully understand it, I can do a search like I did before, read that report, see if it makes sense to me, and then do a video. I can watch a video to say, okay, show me what exactly is this procedure? How is it done? Because when I see the visual of what it is, it makes going through the report for me a lot easier, right? So the skin was infiltrated, right? So it's running, right? And I'm not going to run the whole video. It's just for illustrative purposes. You can do that. So you can visually see what that is, the kind of procedures they do. And you can also see how it might be dictated. Doesn't mean it's going to be exactly dictated like that, but when you visualize and see what it is, then if you see it on a report, you won't freak out, right? So whether you're dealing with a practice like Digestive Health Center of South Florida, that I think they have multiple doctors, that has, a couple of doctors and a bunch of services, or a really large organization, if you research them, then you know the kind of work they do, the kind of things they code that you would be coding or collecting AR for, right? Now that I know what the scope of services are, I can dig into my CPT book, find out at a basic level what's required. I can go to my payer policies. There are many that exist, right? If I did something like PEG tube and United Healthcare, right? This is Advent Medical Group, right? Maybe I come up with a policy. I see a policy that said something about it, right? That tells me what a coverage indication is. I can check my CCI edits and see if there's any bundling concerns for it. I can look into my CCI manual and see if there's additional guidance for it. So I absolutely can find out about an organization and what to expect. If I come into a coding test, I'm not going to freak out about it because I know something about it. Doesn't mean I need to know how to do everything on the page necessarily, but knowing that you have experience with something and you've been exposed to something, a practice is more likely to take you on. Third point I wanted to cover. What if you're a coder going in for a job and you've got zero experience? One thing that I think often happens in the industry, because you hear no experience, you hear it so much, it's so frustrating. There are experiences outside of healthcare that would help you in healthcare, right? So if you had to get your foot in the door and you had to do something like payment posting, well, if you've done cashiering before or cash handling, anything where you dealt with cash and money reconciliation and accounting type functions, put that on your resume. That's important. That crosses over. You'll see that with from payment posting and those kind of analytics. If you have, like, let's say you work for an insurance company, especially a health insurance company. Oh, I just did call center or whatever. I work for United Healthcare, whatever that is. That's still helpful. If you have Microsoft Office experiences, I love to use a story because it's true, it's relevant. The first extern I hired for my own company used to be an executive assistant and was also a real estate agent. But like real estate, kind of is always like a flux kind of career. So, it's good, it's bad, you have to find other things. So she was an executive assistant. She had advanced Excel and Access skills. I had her build a sheet for me. Right? So no, she was a new coder. She was trained to do all the things I kind of taught her to do in the industry, but I could use her experience for what we did, right? So if it's Excel, if it's Access, even Word is helpful. You may not use it a lot if you work collections or something like that. Appeals, you would definitely need Microsoft Word. You're probably going to end up drafting letters. If you have experience drafting persuasive letters, right, writing things like that, then again, that kind of ties to the appeals and AR process that could be very helpful for you. So those are things that I hope would help you on your journey to become a medical coder. Check your resume, of course, spell check and all that other stuff, but make sure your resume isn't being a deterrent for a potential employer and it looks like it may be telling a story that isn't really relevant to you. In preparing for the interview, when they call you and say, you've got the interview, find out if they have a website or where you can learn more about the providers or group that you would be working for. That'll help gear you to know exactly what they do and where you should go in your guidelines to refresh and recap. And if you need to kind of prep for a coding test, I think it's crazy to have any kind of coding test or assessment that isn't relative to your organization because that person passing it isn't necessarily demonstrative of them being able to do what you need them to do. But it's crazy. You may have a company that does that, but ideally, if they are going to assess you, it's going to be relative on what they do. So that should be you trying to find out what they do and how you might see it. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, I'd love you to, like it. If you think it's informative and someone else could use it, feel free to share it. And if you want to stay abreast of any upload videos that I do moving forward or any changes that I share on this channel, feel free to subscribe. Again, I hope you found it helpful and hope you have a great day.